to another edition of Foundation Focus. My name is Jim McKenzie, and I'm the Executive Director of the St. Lucie County Education Foundation. My guest in this session is Carrie Padrick, the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you.
We wanted to talk a little bit today about what is and how is curriculum and assessment and professional development all kind of put together, and what does it mean for our students and our students' success. Carrie, we've talked a number of times how preparing our students for college and careers is the major part of what education is all about. Let's talk a little bit about that and how it is accomplished in our school district.
Well, it is a big rock as we look at the whole educational landscape. When we're working to prepare children for college and career, we need to make certain that we are teaching to the standards, because the standards are designed to have students ready for college and career. In fact, our standards were developed in a backwards design format. We worked with professionals and experts in the field and decided what it was that students really needed to be able to master in order to be productive in the workforce and be viable in their college courses as they move toward work experiences. So it was a backwards design from they graduate from 12th grade with this knowledge. Now what do we need to make certain that they are learning as far as a scaffolded approach to building knowledge from kindergarten all the way up to 12th, but it was built 12th grade down to
just like building a building.
Building a building, starting with the end in mind is really what occurred.
This is my vision for this building out in the city. Now, how do I get there?
Exactly.
And from the rough blueprint.
And actually, you mentioned rough blueprint. The blessing that we have at our fingertips now is the blueprint is very precise, because the guideposts for learning are our standards. And they're very concrete, they're very specific. We know exactly what a student should be able to know and be able to do by the end of a particular grade level.
Tell me a little bit about the resources and the strategies of getting to that building.
Okay, and that's one of the really fine-tuned pieces of our education, because while we have standards, the art and science comes together with teaching, because we as individual counties, as individual states, get to choose what resources we are going to use to move students to those levels of proficiency as we are moving toward the guideposts for instruction, our standards. So looking through research and determining what the best practices are with the highest yield and results for teaching children using particular strategies, the resources that are going to meet the different needs of students, because as you and I both know, we have so many children of different backgrounds, different learning styles that are coming to us hungry to learn, and we need to make sure that the resources that we are selecting to use for them are appropriate to meet their needs.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because I think that there was a report out here not long ago. There's 41 different nationalities that are represented in St. Lucie County, 43 different languages, not including dialects. So as we try to prepare students for their success as they walk into the world beyond education, how do we get them there, and what tools do we need to use? What's the monitoring process of how do we make sure we're moving forward and the steps are moving forward?
It's a great question, because we know, we have expectations for our students' learning. We have the resources and the strategies to get them there, and then it's the assessment, the ongoing assessment, that helps us understand the trend lines for student learning, where they're excelling and where they need a little extra support. And when we talk about assessments, we have many different kinds of assessments in St. Lucie County. We have some very formal district-wide assessments that are given periodically throughout the year, and teachers in classrooms have assessments that they give on a regular basis to assess the learning of their students. But every day, observing a student, seeing what the student is doing, listening to how he or she is responding, we are always assessing how students are learning and growing. So when we say assessment is ongoing, it is. It's every day. It's every minute, working with children, knowing what they're learning, knowing what their needs are in informal ways, and then also in those formal ways that are sometimes either computer-based or pencil and paper-based.
From developing this student, where does it start? Does it start in kindergarten? Does it start in third grade? You know, is it like when I went to school? I mean, kindergarten, you took a nap and you played and you interacted with folks with kids that you never had an opportunity to do at home. So how is that process changed, and how do we engage the students, and what time frame do we do that?
Well, once again, research is always underway as we study what is best for students and when they are primed for learning, and it actually takes place well before our students enter kindergarten. Children have the ability to learn and grow at very, very early ages, and we as educators would love to be able to impact their lives from the moment that they begin looking and exploring their world. But one of the things we have been able to do over the past few years that is making a tremendous impact on students entering kindergarten, more ready to learn than ever, is digging down into age 3. We have a project underway, age 3 to grade 3 literacy, and we are working with our private and our public providers for early child care, helping one another with professional development, with resources. What does a literacy center look like for a child that's just beginning to explore sounds and become aware of the sounds are represented by shapes, the letters? So there's been a great collaboration there in St. Lucie County. And as we gave a mid-year report this year, as I said, this is our 3rd year underway, we now have data to show that we are touching 75% of children before they enter our kindergarten classrooms. And that is really tremendous, because putting a book, putting literacy in the hands of children, speaking a wide variety of vocabulary to children in their early years is so important to making sure that they are on the right road for successful literacy opportunities and ability to show what they know. So this has been something that we are very, very proud of, because as St. Lucie County, we all want our children to learn and grow and be the very best that they can be, because they're a reflection of St. Lucie County.
Well, I think, and you're absolutely right, I think as we try to change our community to a much more research or scientific community, we've got to get students engaged at a very early age to start thinking and exploring and get their mind wandering. And I think, being able to do that with 75% of the young children that are eventually going to be school district children, to give them that head start, and not to coin another organization, but I mean to give them the ability to start to the process of inquiry.
Correct.
Is really, I think, quite an amazing feat that we've been able to accomplish here in St. Lucie County. You said a word that I think maybe confuses people, and confuses me at times: literacy.
Okay.
What is it? I mean, is it just the ability to read?
Well, the ability to read and to understand, a great deal goes into that, because children need to be able to first hear the sounds. They need to be able to associate the sound with letters. They need to be able to connect the letters. They need to be able to make sense of what those letters mean when they are put together. And from there, we build from words to sentences, into paragraphs, and into longer passages. And with that, there needs to be a solid understanding of what all of that means, because we can call words all day, and then not being able to make sense of what those words are puts us right back at ground zero. So we want to make certain that our children are coached in how to read through passages. And there's actually a difference between reading through a passage that is fiction and a passage that is nonfiction. So there are different ways in which we coach our children to go back and read for meaning. Also, they need to be able to, as they learn and grow, understand the credibility of the source that they're reading, because they need to be good critical thinkers and decision makers as they move through school and through life. So, asking yourself, what is it that the author is trying to say? Why is he trying to say this? And what is his purpose for writing this piece? As well as, it's so very important that we create that desire and that love of reading, because it can open so many fascinating doors for children to explore. And really, as a child is young and growing, the curiosity and asking questions about his or her world, but then also knowing how to get some of the answers.
Yeah, and I think, we've had, over this last month, I guess it's kind of been literacy and reading time on the calendar, and many of us have gone out and read to students and then able to ask them questions about what it was that you just read to them, how they're able to express themselves. I mean, I think that that's an important piece, and I don't know that 50 years ago, kids were able to do that, and I think that's all part of that development when you start talking about getting a student engaged at age 3. It's kind of an important component. We talked about kids being engaged, and 70% of the kids coming into kindergarten having taken a pre-K type program. What does that mean to them down the road?
Having rich literature experiences at the youngest of ages sets a student up for success. As a child that was read to, as a child that loved to read, as a child that interacts with adults and other children, hearing words, hearing other people's experiences, builds background knowledge. And when you and I read, we make connections with what we know to what we're reading. We can assess, we can analyze, we can compare, we can contrast. We then have something else that comes into play. So we are analyzing and assessing multiple different reading passages and making connections with our background. If we don't have a background to connect to, or vocabulary is very unfamiliar, it hampers the comprehension process. And so anything we can do to provide a very rich, deep experience for our children to make connections to is very helpful in their ongoing literacy efforts. Also, being able to take what they've read and think about it and come up with some of their own conclusions. When you get into inferences, for example, that's a much higher level thinking skill than just repeating back what someone has read as a first sentence in a paragraph, because you're having to analyze and assess. So being able to take that and then put it into written form is a whole nother level that we need to make certain that our children are proficient with. Because when you put something into writing, it's like putting it into concrete. You're making it much more stable, you're committing to it, and then there, of course, are refinements with our writing skills as well. So all of that is very important to our students' success in communicating what they think, defending what they believe, and basically being a very responsible citizen in our society.
How does that, and that's really kind of interesting, because it sounds as though as you go through the grades or you go through the process, it first starts out with reading, and then kind of understanding, and then writing, and where does it go from there? Well, how does it get into where do I go from that very first reading that I do as a 3-year-old to that final week of graduation? What does that look like? How does it change? Or is that a 2.5-hour program, which we don't have time for?
That's probably more than a 2.5-hour program. However, in a nutshell, as you move through pre-kindergarten, through 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, all the way up to 12th grade and beyond, the complexity of what we read, the number of passages that we read and put together, and the counterbalance of nonfiction to fiction is much more evident. We start out with reading a lot of fiction, a lot of stories, and there's usually a beginning, a middle, and an end. The movement into informational text, we see some of the vocabulary changes because some words are very specific to perhaps a science content area or a social studies content area, so we need to grow our vocabulary. The complexity of the sentences grows as children begin to move through the grades, and the expectation for drawing conclusions, making inferences, and defending what it is that you think based on evidence from the text. So now I'm not just reading for the sake of reading for pleasure. I'm reading because I want to prove something. I want to share something. I want to tell you what I think, and this is why. And so it is a very, very complicated process of learning and growing, but with each standard, with each expectation that a child is to reach a certain point from year to year, the complexity grows. I'm no longer picking out main idea by looking at the first sentence of a paragraph. I'm selecting the main idea because I'm reading in between the lines and I'm figuring out what the author is trying to say. Or I'm pulling several passages together and telling you what the main idea of all three is. And that's a pretty simplistic approach to what I've just explained, but it serves the purpose, I think, for how we move from the very, very basic foundational skills for reading up to those very complex skills of being able to infer and synthesize information from more than one source.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about how do you assess a student's progress? How do we know that, you mentioned early on about statistics and we have data. Mm-hmm. How do we continually use that data? How do we continually build that data? What's the process? Because your department is very unique. I mean, most of us understand you have the executive branch, you've got the legislative branch, you've got those that put down the rules, as three different components. What we have here is creating the curriculum, creating the assessment, and then creating the professional development pieces that help in getting back to the first piece. So it's all everything under one roof.
Yes.
So how do we assess what we're doing, create data? How does that all work in creating the other pieces?
All three have to work very, very closely together, because if we have curriculum, we need to know how we're doing, and so the assessment piece is very important. If I didn't have curriculum, I wouldn't have anything to assess. And it's all about learning, and professional development is that ongoing opportunity to learn more about our craft, to learn more about what we do and what our children need. So if you could imagine three silos, each filled with grain. One is curriculum, one is quality instruction, which is professional development, and one is assessment. Standing alone, they are not going to accomplish a lot. But if we open the doors and let the grain flow out and they're all working together, that's when the magic happens. And so as a team, as members of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, we consciously work together. We blend our roles. Anytime there's a project underway, someone from assessment is there to provide voice as we grow the plan. Someone from professional development, someone from curriculum. Because together is how we make everything work harmoniously and make it work so that it's going to be of greatest impact to our children and to our teachers.
And that's important. We all learn every day. Mm-hmm. And as we've said, from the 3-year-old to the ancient one here, you learn something different. What do you gather from national, state, and other assessment programs, and how do you incorporate that into what we do at the district?
Okay. I think you're talking probably about some of our progress monitoring tools that we use. In St. Lucie County, we have our own internal progress monitoring, which helps us to gauge our students' progress in reading, mathematics, science, history. And it's a very, very intricate process, because as you're creating an assessment, you have to be very aware of what the standards are that the students are held accountable to. Because if we're going to measure something, we need to measure exactly what it is that they're learning. And so we use our test item specs, which are our standards, as guideposts, but also we have to be very aware of how complex the question is. We cannot just pose a very simple question to students and expect to get a very wide range of awareness of how that child is doing. So we look at the complexity of how a question is posed. The level of thinking is what that is required by the student, and the test has to be built with an array of complexity of questions, as well as a wide variety of questions to assess the standards that they're being taught. In St. Lucie County, we have progress monitoring assessments that are given at the very beginning of the year. It's also given at mid-year, and we are in the midst right now of giving our third battery of progress monitoring assessments. What that does is it gives us a snapshot of our students' progress over time. And that data then helps inform our instruction, because let's say we can see how John is progressing in reading. We see that his trend line is continually moving upward, but more specifically, I want to get granular. I want to know how he's doing standard by standard. And we're fortunate to have a system called Performance Matters, and it can break down assessments standard by standard, so that as a teacher I can see how he's excelling in standards and perhaps where there's a need for me to provide additional instruction. The great thing for parents is there's a parent report with that, and so when parents are conferencing with teachers and they're wanting to know what they can do to support their child at home, that parent document from Performance Matters can give that very specific information on where a child is excelling and where a child needs some additional support. So that partnership can be very specific. We also have some national tests that helps us to progress monitor for students perhaps that are in some of our more structured reading and mathematics classes, trying to build those skills, and that gives us data on how our students are performing in relationship to other children across the nation. And then of course as we move into the high schools, some of those national tests are so imperative as our children are vying for spots in college. And so there's a lot of coaching that goes on at our secondary schools as well to help prepare our children for understanding the format of those tests. In the classroom, they're getting the content, and then sometimes there just needs to be some coaching and awareness on the format and what certain tests expect a child to do, whether it be computer-based or pencil and paper.
So it's really, kind of designed so that not only the student knows where they're at, the teacher knows where they're at, the teachers in their work groups where they may have access to different students at different times during the day sort of can have a good feeling of where that student is and what might trigger the learning process or trigger their enthusiasm towards something. And then again it's shared with the parents and the students.
And that's so important for differentiating our instruction and making sure that we are zooming in on every child's needs every day. One of the things you mentioned that is very important, and I'm so glad you said it, you talked about the students knowing where they are in their learning. And that is key, because a child needs to be able to understand and take responsibility for his learning, and knowing what these assessments are telling not only the teacher but telling me as a student is going to help me set goals, understand where I need to dig in a little bit more. And so there's a whole set of learning strategies associated with helping students understand the data that comes from assessments so they can take responsibility for their learning.
And I think that's to me is one of the more important things, that there becomes a time in a student's education process where, okay, I don't have, mom and dad are done sitting me down for 2 hours doing homework. I need to start taking responsibility for that and engaging in the functions that will allow me to make sure that I can graduate at some time. And that is good for our community.
Absolutely. It's that whole idea of the intrinsic reward that we get. We don't do something just because there's a I'm going to get something at the other end. I'm going to do something because I know personally that's what's best for me, and that's helping me to reach my goals, become a better person, become a better citizen, and not have any doorways closed to me, whether it be college or career, because by golly, I'm ready.
Good. Well, I think that, you know, what you're doing in your department has a great deal of importance to our students. How do you see the foundation helping you as to moving these things forward? I think, you know, we've had a number of conversations privately, but let's put it out on the table.
Well,
what can we do to help?
First of all, you all are a tremendous support for education in St. Lucie, as it is. One of the things that we really appreciate about the Education Foundation is that you are, just like our students and our teachers, you're always learning and trying to figure out what it is that you can do to support the vision of St. Lucie County. And you've come to me several times and said, what are our key initiatives? And so in the past, you've been very, very supportive of our STEM opportunities, where we're growing our students' ability to research and work through science, engineering, technologies, and mathematics. And you've helped us with professional development. You've helped us, been a very big supporter in the STEM fairs, which is our science fair, and sending students on to state and international, where they are recipients of college scholarships that, my goodness, as a student in 11th and 12th grade myself, wouldn't have realized years ago that those opportunities are available today. So thank you for all of that. The other thing that I know that you have been and continue to help support with is literacy instruction, and how we are helping students become more widely able to research, putting materials and professional development at their fingertips and their teachers' fingertips. So, you know, continuing to support the efforts for literacy in early age 3 to grade 3 all the way up to grade 12 is vital, and we thank you for that and look forward to more. STEM, all areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics that are related to the standards, perfect. There's a big workshop coming up this summer that I know you're a part of, helping kids to think about their world. And then, of course, we've got the professional development for our teachers, because we always need to learn and grow, pull in new research, so that as practitioners and professionals, we can always be the very best that we can be. You're a tremendous partner for our students and our teachers, and I thank the Education
and our board
Foundation.
is very pleased to be able to help in so many of those areas. I think that you know, getting everyone on the same page is good for all of our business partners, our board members, and really for this community. We do have a great place to live and work, and as long as we can keep it moving forward, I think we'll all be very happy. Carrie, thank you so very much coming in and talking a little bit about your department, maybe explaining what literacy really is, and we're so appreciative of everything that you do for every student every day also. This has been Foundation Focus. We appreciate you tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.